I think I can shrink that for the moment. Okay, well, welcome to those who've already logged in. As I said, during the first few minutes, we'll be looking at a brief presentation from myself on some of the basic MSDI definitions and things. I'm not going to go into that in any detail because we covered it in the webinar on the 3rd of November. And as I said earlier, the recording for that is available from the GSDI Association project website. You'll see on the intro screen here the GSDIassociation.org URL. If you go to that website, you'll find a projects menu option, and then under that a Marine SDI option. And everything that we're doing in the project is being recorded on the website, including the recordings for these meetings, for these webinars. Today, rather than 2 or 3 of us talking generally about Marine SDI, what I've done is coerced 3 colleagues from the International Hydrographic Organization Marine SDI Working Group to make presentations on their own Marine SDI initiatives in their own countries. We've got Commander Kamarudin Yusuf from the Royal Malaysian Navy, Mr. Jens Peter Hartman from the Danish Geodata Agency, and Lieutenant Commander Guilherme Pinheiro from the Brazilian Navy, who's in the Navy Hydrographic Center. They all made excellent presentations to our recent IHO Marine SDI Working Group meeting in Vancouver back in February, so I thought it would be good if... hello? I just had a warning message appeared. I thought it would be good if we could have them present again in today's session. So moving straight in, a little bit of here's the welcome. We're going to do an introduction, then the 3 presentations from the panelists, and then a short Q&A session at the end. There are 5 handouts available from your tab, your control tab on the right-hand side. 4 of these are the presentations as PDF files, and 1 is an SDI questionnaire that I've used in all of my SDI-related presentations, which you are more than happy to take back to your own organizations and have a look at this to see what level of preparedness you are, what level you've reached in your SDI preparations. So very quickly, Marine Spatial Data Infrastructure. This is taken from the International Hydrographic Office publication C17, the Marine Dimension. There is a new version of this document has now been produced and will be released. I believe it's in June. Mr. Hartman can update us on that when he says a few words as the chairman of the IHO Marine SDI Working Group. It's become very important. First of all, Marine is one of the few themes within the broader SDI context where there is a lot of focus these days as a separate theme, partly because of the interest in marine spatial planning and marine cadastre. Essentially, it's an infrastructure that promotes interoperability of data at all levels. And when we move into the coastal area, all levels means also bringing in the land-based activity. I guess one thing we should try to remember is that marine SDIs don't exist by themselves. They're a subset of the national SDI, hopefully developed in relation to any e-government activities that are taking place, and that is a subset of the broader national information infrastructure itself, which definitely takes account of the e-government plans. The key in all of the thematic areas and in SDI generally is people. Who leads the initiatives, and especially in our world, how do you get these multiple sectors working together? Especially when you move into the coastal area with land and sea data meeting at the coastline. So I'm not going to work through these slides in detail. Again, they're on the handouts, they're on our website. What I wanted to do is just highlight the problems, the challenges we face in the marine world. We have a lot of themes to cover under the marine name. Here on the left is the multi-purpose marine cadastre from the States. Here's the marine spatial planning themes from the EU. You can see that they're widely varying, which means a lot of different actors get involved. There are different legal bases for setting up the marine SDI. There is no legal basis in the EU in their own maritime policy for this. It's just something they've considered as part of the policy that should be good to do. Even in the US, there is regional planning bodies are not regulatory bodies, and they have no independent legal authority. to regulate or otherwise direct these government actions. However, they also have one of the most active geoportals in the world with the under the DataGov activity. Standardization is obviously key to any SDI initiative, and conformance to those standards. Again, the Marine Spatial Planning Directive in the EU has specific clauses on data use and sharing, but it doesn't actually say in detail what you should do. It's just that we should decide how to organize the sharing of the information. So in that sense, it's much less prescriptive than, for example, the Inspire Directive in Europe, which many of you will already be aware of, where we're told in great detail what we have to do. The Directive on Marine Spatial Planning does actually mention Inspire and says we should be following the Inspire, in other words, a pre-existing NSDI template for doing the marine SDI. You have the complex integration issues. We got legislation, jurisdictional issues, administrative areas. We got all different types of information. This is from Canada, from the Canadian GDI. This also makes it very difficult to work in the marine environment, because especially when we're bringing people from what is really a historic marine environment into what is a topographic environment. We started working on coastal GIS in 1995. That's a long time ago, and this has always been an issue when we work in that area. What I do want to concentrate on for just a couple of slides is the new IHO marine data standards being developed under the S100 framework. These are based on the ISO 1900 series, so they're actually based on internationally agreed standards. These are independently being developed at different rates of speed. The IHO Marine SDI Working Group has just published about a month ago its work plan for 2018 to 2020. These are all the items that we're looking at in the working group. I'm not going to go into detail on this. There's a lot of information available and will be available from our own website on what the working group is doing. We are a member of the working group as the association, plus the 3 panelists are all members, and Jens-Peter Hartmann is the chair of that working group. The other activity that's underway at the global level is the Open Geospatial Consortium Marine Domain Working Group, which was only formed not even a year ago now, 30th of May 2016. We've had 3 or 4 meetings. There are some activities in hand that focus obviously mainly on the standards issues and the standardized data harmonization issue, looking at land and sea integration, the wider use of marine data and standards other than, for example, just safety of life at sea or just navigation, which has been the former Hydrographic Society's focus, and current marine SDI initiatives around the world. So one of the things that we're supposed to be developing in the DWG are a white paper exploring the formats for bathymetry data dissemination to a broader user base so that more people can use it than just for hydrographic navigation purposes. Develop a structured OGC project, come up with some primary use case document focusing on, for example, the Pan-Arctic region where there's a lot of activity these days, work on an OGC conceptual document study, and come up with some funding for a combined technology demonstrator. This is how OGC typically progresses. Those of you who aren't that familiar with Open Geospatial Consortium, they are a global organization whose standards development work feeds into ISO and other standards bodies, and they typically take on a wide range of themes. They've got over 550 members from all sectors of society. And then they do these interoperability test beds, et cetera, to test out new technology. So for the first time, we actually have a marine domain focus in that working group. So I'm going to finish there so that we have, sorry for romping through that. Again, the slides are in the handout, and the much more detailed presentation on that is in the recording that we did back on the 3rd of November. What I'd like to do now is move right on to Commander Yusuf to make his presentation about the work on marine SDI in Malaysia. So I will hand over to you, Yusuf.
Okay, thank you.
Right, you should now have your screen.
A very good evening, everyone. Selamat datang. I'm Commander Kamarudin Yusof, currently head of Meteorology and Oceanography of National Hydrography Center. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Roger Longhorn, Secretary General GSDI Association, for giving me the opportunity to share with you regarding the planning and progress of our initiative to develop marine spatial data infrastructure in Malaysia in order to support my national program, which is my GDI, Malaysia Geospatial Data Infrastructure. The topic of my presentation today is Marine SDI supporting GDI. As we know, geospatial data and GIS technology are increasingly fitting and rightfully used as a widespread tool because of the capability to improve development and planning of the nation. This graphic is very common for us. I'm sure most of us know that 70% of the earth is covered by the water, and most of the population are in coastal area, as mentioned by Mr. Roger just now. Malaysia is the maritime nation. Yes, it was declared in 1997 by former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. This slide shows the shipping density analysis in Malaysia. As you can see, there is where is my office, located along the Malacca Strait. What happened to my screen? Okay, sorry for that. Malaysia as a maritime area is double the land area. Being a country surrounded by the sea, Malaysia is highly dependent on the sea to generate economic activities. As you know, 90% of our international trade is carried by seaborne transport, and our port are key gateway to this trade. All of hydrocarbon resource came from offshore side, and oil and gas provide a major source of revenue to the country. The sea also provide fishery resource and generate a host of supporting economic activities such as port operation, marine tourism, shipbuilding, ship management, logistics, financing, trade facilitation, and many others that generate income. Marine governance is complex in Malaysia, as shown on the screen. It's governed by 11 ministries as the authority for nautical charting in my country, which is my office, National Hydrography Center. It is essential for us to work together in achieving a common goal. Hence, National Hydrography Committee is formed to undertake marine issues in relation to hydrography and charting. This is particularly important as hydrography is the key for the establishment for marine SDI. This is a situational analysis about the marine data management and can transform to the knowledge management, which is marine is a complex, as I mentioned before, different jurisdiction under various agency and ministry. So we need mechanism for sharing through the similar solution with each marine SDI. Malaysia Geospatial Data Infrastructure is an initiative by the government of Malaysia to develop a geospatial data infrastructure to enhance the awareness about data availability and improve access to geospatial information. This can be fulfilled by facilitating data sharing among participating agencies. MyGDI, as the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, or NSDI for Malaysia, is a geospatial data infrastructure that comprises of policy, standard, technology research and development, and skilled human resource. MACGDI was established under the Ministry of Natural Resource of Environment. My office is National Hydrographic Center, is under Ministry of Defense, manned by Navy. It's actually to replace the existing Secretariat for National Infrastructure for the Land Information System, which is NALIS. It is responsible for the development of the Malaysia Geospatial Data Infrastructure, which is MyGDR. Through this infrastructure, smart partnership among agencies is continuously being developed to produce and share geospatial information, thus providing customer-focused, cost-effective, and timely delivery of geospatial data for the purpose of facilitating the sharing and dissemination of geospatial information among all levels of government, the private, non-private, profit sector, and the academic community. We need to say MyGDI enable people to discover, share, and use geospatial information and service. This is a 4 pillar of the key MSDI component, which was laid down in C70, Spatial Data Infrastructure, the marine dimension for guidance for the hydrography office, which is policy, governance, technical standard, information system, and also geographic content. Now we move about the MyGDI governance in Malaysia. As I mentioned before, the top committee is MyGDI National Coordinating Committee. It's responsible to the government of Malaysia, specifying the principles and guidelines for development and implementation of MyGDI, establishing working committee as critically required, coordinating and monitoring to development and implementation of MyGDI through committee that are established under MyGDI National Coordinating Committee. MyGDI Framework Technical Committee is responsible for the MyGDI National Coordinating Committee for formulating policy and guidelines to ensure effective sharing of geospatial data through MyGDI. MyGDI Standard Technical Committee is responsible also for the MyGDI National Coordinating Committee for the developing standard for geographic information geometric in MyGDI, coordinating and monitoring the usage of standard for geographic information in MyGDI for the purpose for data sharing. There is a new committee which is MyGDI Marine Technical Committee, which is committee was established last year. This committee was led by National Hydrographic Center. About the Marine GDI Technical Committee is a transformation from the existing committee, which is under Water Object Information Working Committee, which under National Hydrographic Committee. Now this committee is formed MyGDI Marine Technical Committee, which is answerable for MyGDI National Committee, and also National Hydrographic Committee. For your information, National Hydrographic Committee was chaired by Chief Hydrographer of Malaysia. This is about the 21 agency is team up to become the technical committee under MyGDI Marine Technical Committee. There's the last photo that was taken for last year, the first MyGDI Marine Technical Committee. Now we move about technical standard. As a member of the ISO, for sure, we have to promote and use the S100 standard and also other product specification. For time being, S102 already published for the bathymetry surface. Now for the data sharing for bathymetry in Malaysia, we're using the bathymetry attribute grid format. And of course, we're using the OGC compliant for the data dissemination through OGC web service, as you know, for the WMS, the MTS, and so on. This is a framework data category existing in MyGDI. about the 12 category or team, which hydrography is a lead agency, is a National Hydrographic Center. About the geographic content, because data is very important for the MSDI. Now we already identified the key data set for inclusion in MSDI in Malaysia. Actually, we took from the C70, I mean the guideline, so we break down what layer we have to portray on the MSDI, for instance, geographical name, coastline, rock rate of fluctuation, extenuation, and all, and of course the oceanography. As you know, hydrographic data as the foundation, the marine SDI, and hydrographic data as a fundamental bedrock of the ocean and the sea. For time being, for the initial stage, my agency will already share about the raster chart as the base map, and also the vector chart from the ENC as the base map when we want to use the add-on operational or additional layer. This is a hydrographic data management workflow in my office. So of course we have the primary data capture, I mean the data acquisition from our hydrographic service. We're using the processing, we do the QC management, and we populate data to my BDB database. Actually, in my office, we embark the carry total solution for our product from the processing management until we produce the product, which is the paper chart and ENC, and also the AML. So currently we have two database, which is my BDB to populate the bathymetry data, and also capable to populate backscatter data. And also we have my HPD. Actually, HPD is hydrographic production, the hydrographic production database. And also we have a HPD server, and also we're using the spatial function server. It's a GI server to generate or to produce or to provide the OGC layer, which is WMS, WMS. Other secondary data we took from the other agency like oil and gas producer, telecom line, and also the sand mining operation. So from the secondary data, we do the QC, and also we populate to HPD database. Actually, HPD database is to populate the vector data. From that, as I mentioned before, it's a MyGDI program. They already prepared the infrastructure for the GIS solution. They're using the ArcGIS. Now you can see on the screen how we integrate the OGC layer to the MyGOS. MyGOS is the ArcGIS platform, which is a Malaysia geospatial online service. From that, we can merge from the OGC layer, and we can share through the desktop, web, or device. This is a MyG portal. It's a visible front end to MyGDI. The gateway through the which user access the geospatial information service. There is some MyGDI application. You can go through on the URL below to explore more about the MyGDI Explorer. I mean the metadata catalog in Malaysia. And so we have, as I mentioned, MyGDI Explorer. And so we have a MyGDI database. You can see we actually this is data from the ENC, then we populate, publish the service, and share to government agency. As I mentioned before, this is a Malaysia Geospatial online service, so MyGOS. This is the print screen of the MyGOS. You can add on a layer from the OGC, like WMS, WMTS. For that, you also can overlay with the existing raster chart. And of course, you can do the analysis like proximity, like buffering, to the spatial analysis through the web. Before I jump to conclusion, Marine SDI is a marine solution in order to support national spatial data infrastructure, which is my GDI, in order to and also user can make the initiative for the my GDI program to do the research like marine spatial planning, integrated coastal zone management, sensitive environment assessment, and so on. So, conclusion, as I mentioned before, MSDI is about the best practice. It's a continuous process. The biggest challenge is people and organization. The culture. There are many benefits to be realized from MSDI, as a previous slide. And National Hydrography Center is the right agency to develop marine SDI in Malaysia, because hydrography data provide the fundamental bedrock. The IHO standards are aligned with the ISO 19100 series, and also we have OGC standard. Now we already have OGC Marine Working Group, and we ICT ready, and we have a good governance through National Hydrography Committee. By 2018, Marine SDI in Malaysia is ready. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that. Very interesting. And it's interesting to see that you've got an actual technical committee built up within your national committee structure, which is something we just don't see in most countries who are working on this. Now, can you pass presentation back to me?
Sure.
Thank you. Please, if you have questions for any of the speakers, type them into your questions panel, because we will try to answer them at the end and even beyond the end of the meeting if we have by email. Okay, so we should be back on my screen now, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm now going to turn over to Jens Peter Hartmann, the chair of the IHO Marine SDI Working Group from the Danish Geodata Agency. He's also directly involved in the Baltic Sea Marine Spatial Data Infrastructure Working Group. So, Jens, I will now pass over to you.
Thank you, Roger. I just have to make sure that you can see my screen.
No, your screen's disappeared.
Is it available now?
I can see your screen now, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Roger, and thank you for giving me the possibility to give a presentation about the Danish maritime spatial data infrastructure. And basically, I think a lot of the components in the Danish maritime spatial data infrastructure is similar to what we just have seen in the last presentation, but I'll just try to explain how we have been doing it in Denmark. We started with a discussion about establishing a Danish MSDI about 7 years ago. We saw a lot of new organizations and new initiatives on the sea. Traditionally, our hydrographic office have focused on safety at sea, and the primary user have been the manner on board the ship. But as we saw a lot of new initiative, especially from Europe, we saw there was a demand to have access to our data for other use than just the safety of navigation. This is the basic idea of the Danish MSDI, and I think this triangle should show that the importance of or the difficulties in dealing with the MSDI. If I had to make the same drawing 5 years ago, I've probably made data as the biggest challenge, but as we have realized today, data is not the biggest challenge. We have all the standards in place, we have the data in place, we have the technical functionality in place. I think what we realized was probably that to establish a governance model, establish a financial model, ended up to be the biggest challenge, and it still is a challenge because we are now dealing with marine spatial planning, and the Danish MSDI have to provide data for the Danish marine spatial plans. We also realized that education of the different maritime agencies turned out to be a huge job, and we have arranged a lot of workshops educating the different participants from the maritime agencies in participating in MSDI. Our MSDI is you can say divided in different components. At the moment we have 12 maritime agencies participating in the Danish MSDI on a volunteer basis, and we also share the financial costs. Now we are providing data to the Danish marine spatial planning, and that will in the future change our governance model, because now it's by law stated in the marine spatial planning law in Denmark that the agencies have to provide their data through the MSDI. But we have established, you can say, like 5 different appendixes. The first one is the governance model, and it states the rights and the things that the different agencies have to do to be a member of the MSDI, but also what they should provide, and the financial model. And the financial model is specified in Annex 2, and I'll come back to that. Then we have a technical description. We are trying to follow the Inspire directive, so all the data are shared at the data owner. It's not shared in a central database, but as the owner, and it's the owner of the data that have to provide a VMS service or a VFS service or a download service. So we had to make a specification about how they should do it, the standards they should follow, and how to establish the metadata and all other relevant technology to be used to make sure that we had this similar approach to our MSDI. Then we have the description of a data set. We have had a long discussion and investigation about what are the data sets needed for marine spatial planning as a use case, and we've been dealing with that for 2 years, and now we have established a marine spatial planning task force, and now the planners start to use the data, and we have to revisit this plan of data sets, because now we find out that we miss some data sets. Some of the data sets we really don't need, and some of the quality of the data sets have to be improved. Then we establish an implementation plan to agree on when the VMS services and the different services should be available, and we expect that the Danish MSDI is fully operational 1st of April this year. Then we also established a GIS platform, what we call the Blue Danish Sea Map, and I think that is more for the planners and for public access to the data we have. In the governance model, we have established this MSDI forum. It's a kind of a steering committee. We have a secretariat that is placed in the Danish Geodata Agency, and then we have the 12 different maritime agencies participating in the Danish MSDI. So the forum have to approve our agreements. They have to approve the yearly budget. As I said before, this is financed by the participating agencies. So we had a lot of discussion about the budget, and to make sure if we want to do some changes that have to be approved by the MSDI forum. And also if we want to initiate new developments or do something else, that have to be presented and approved by the MSDI forum. It's also the MSDI forum that decides if we have to establish workshops or conferences or anything in the benefits of these 12 agencies. At the moment, the MSDI is only available for the 12 agencies, but we will now start a process of making it more publicly available, and therefore we also have to rearrange our governance model. There's also a description about what are the secretariats going to do, and of course it's not only the secretariat that make the draft agenda, but we also have to have the standards in place to have the educate the different agencies. We are the primary point of contact for technical support, and also to come up with suggestions for new initiatives to develop the MSDI. I think an important point is also that we have to put some obligations to the participants in the MSDI forum, and that is the agencies, and they have to provide the data. They have to set up the VMS services, and a very important tool is also to establish the metadata and make sure that all these data is available. They also have to set up a single point of contact. So if we in the MSDI Secretariat have to contact one of the agencies, we have to contact this person, and they will be able to help us in for instance, update data, make sure that the VMS service is up and running, and there's a lot of things that day-to-day work that we have to make sure that we do that. We also have to establish the MSDI as one part is an open part of the MSDI that is available for the public, and another part is a part only available for the governmental agencies. And we had to make a distinction between free data and price data. So you could say that all the data in the MSDI is available, but some of the data you have to make an agreement with some of the agencies and pay for these data. And especially our navigational charts, people have to pay for that. I tried to make this drawing about how we have established the Danish MSDI. On the left part, there's the agency's responsibilities, and that is to provide the metadata, to set up the data sets. We have agreed that everyone has to establish a VMS service for all the data sets, and to make sure that the data can be downloaded. If you have a VFS service, you can also make that available, and that starts to be very important when you talk about marine spatial planning, because if you want to make some analysis, you need probably VFS services. Then we have the basic MSDI, and that is what we're dealing with in our agency. That is to set up the governance model to make sure that data and standards are in the right position, to make sure that the technical aspects and the infrastructure is following what we have already agreed on, to set up rules and agreements, and also to make sure that the economy is in right. Then we have the metadata, and we are using the Danish metadata portal. I'll come back to that. And we also have the catalog service that is specified in the Inspire directive. We have made a communication platform where you have access to these different services that is available. One thing is update service, and we haven't established that yet, but that was something that some of the agencies liked us to have, that they could go to the MSDI and update their data as well. Then we have the common portal where you can get all the information about the MSDI. We have this GIS system, and we have different applications. Output, that is the MSDI forum. We have this metadata, we have all the agendas, all the decisions that is available on the communication platform. So that is what we're doing in the Danish MSDI. Then to talk a little bit about the data sets. We started to have interviews with all 12 maritime agencies about what was the data they needed for marine spatial planning, and we ended up with almost 80 different data sets. And we used a lot of this discussion about who is the data owner, and a lot of agencies just thought because we have the data in our charts, navigational charts, the Danish Geodata Agency was the owner. But as a matter of fact, for most of the data sets, we are not the owner. We just provide the data in navigational charts, but it's not necessarily the same that we are the data owner. So we use a lot of discussion about specifying who are the data owner, what are the standards, and what do we need for the data in order to use it in marine spatial planning. We took the Marine Spatial Planning Directive and tried to check if we had the right data for the different topics that were stated in marine spatial planning. And I think we ended up with a lot of data. From a hydrographic point of view, we only deliver like 5 or 6 data sets, but I think in the future we'll be using like between 40 and 30 data sets in our chart production when we have the right arrangements in place. This is to see the MSDI from a Danish perspective, and as we see it, you can use the data for marine spatial planning to give you an overview, and you can use them for planning. The MSDI don't do the planning, it only provides you the data so you can do the planning. And I also like this picture because it shows you one of the challenges from a Danish approach, that we need to have data from our neighboring countries. It don't make sense that we in Denmark make a new ship route and we just end up in a Swedish windmill farm or in German fish farm. So for us in Denmark, it's very important to have regional arrangement with our neighboring countries in order to have information about what is going on in their area. Otherwise, we can't do the planning in Denmark. This is the communication platform, and you need to have like a password, and then you can go and have a lot of information about the Danish MSDI. If you check to the right, you can have access to the GIS system. And we have an open system, as I mentioned, and we have a closed system. And we only have very few data available on the open GIS system today. And all the data is available on our closed system. And it's also because some of the data will not be available for the public because there are some restrictions from the agencies, and they're only allowed to share them with other agencies. But of course, that is something we have to have some attention on when we want to do the marine spatial planning, because the MSP directive said that there should be like public access to the plans, and we'll deal with that. This is just to show you a screenshot from the Danish GIS portal, and here you can see the depth contours, and you can use that. I think this is a screenshot from the Danish metadata portal, and we use the same metadata portal as is used from the Danish SDI, national SDI, and this is the official Inspire portal. What we see now is we're focusing on from a land side, it's only from a national approach. But when we want to exchange data with our neighboring countries, we also need to have this metadata portal in English, and we have now approached the agency responsible for the Inspire metadata portal and asked them if they could translate that to English, and we hope that our neighboring countries will also translate their metadata portals in order for us to harvest the data from different countries. From a marine spatial planning approach, in the Baltic, the Helcom Varsop Secretariat have established a work group that start to deal with how to exchange data in the Baltic. And all the MSDI responsible agencies and the MSP responsible agencies in the Baltic are participating in this working group, and we start to investigate how we can change data across borders, and it's a huge work in for instance, if we have 80 different data sets in Denmark and other countries have different data sets, we start to have like 800 data sets, and to discuss how to exchange that, to agree on standards. And what we realized, for instance, in Denmark, we are the only country that is the hydrographic office that represent the Danish MSP data group. So from other countries, it's agencies that is not dealing with the hydrography that is responsible for data, and they have different ways of harmonizing and exchanging of data. Under the Baltic Sea Hydrographic Commission, we have established a MSDI work group seen from a hydrographic office point of view, and I think the idea of that was to identify and analyze the current status of MSDI implementation. We, as I said, realized that at a lot of countries, it's not the hydrographic office that have the responsibility for marine spatial data infrastructure. We also thought that there was a need to analyze and follow the different MSDI policies that was in both on international and national level, and of course to see how we as a hydrographic office could contribute with our data in this sentence. And I think we have like 1 or 2 years every year, and we have a lot of exchange of knowledge and try to do some pilot projects, seeing how we could provide the hydrographic data in, for instance, marine spatial planning. And as we have talked about, the Marine Spatial Planning Directive in Europe talk about use the best available data, and it's also say that we should ensure transboundary cooperation between member states and also with third countries. And I think for planning approach, this is put a lot of effort on the different agencies to exchange data. And what we realized in the Baltic was it was probably not the data sets we could exchange. It was more the products, for instance, the VMS services we could exchange. And now we're dealing with input data, that is the different VMS services, and output data that will be the different plans that we are going to exchange. And I think when we talk about MSDI from a national, it's also end up will be from a regional approach. And it's like doing a big puzzle and make sure that everything fits together. And I think when we talk about the biggest challenge in MSDI from a national and a regional approach, it's a governance. We have to agree on the data sets that should be exchanged, and we also have to agree on the quality and the standards, have to agree on the technical aspects in order for us to exchange the data sets. We have to establish rules and arrangements so we can change the data across border, but it's not only across border between countries, but it's also across land and sea. And then of course we have to establish a financial model. And I think from a Danish approach, a lot of agencies talk and the public talk about the data should be free, but it's not only to have the data free, but it's also who should pay for the infrastructure, for the GIS system. And if you don't have somebody to maintain the data, to make the quality in the right position, you will end up with an MSDI that can't fulfill the requirements. And of course, the last one is to establish the metadata. And I think the metadata is probably some of the most important issues of a MSDI. That is the information about data. And now we talk about harmonizing the metadata as well. Because, for instance, from a Danish approach, if we want to harvest metadata from other countries, we need to make sure that we have a harmonized approach to use the metadata. last slide, and I like that. That is, I think the biggest challenge will probably be not to collect data in the future, but it will always be to make sure that we have the right data. We have to filter the data, so we make sure that we have the data for the purpose we are going to use the data for, and also to make sure that, for instance, that the MSDI provide the authoritative data, that is the right data that the planners can use for planning. And I think that's end of my presentation. So I'll give it over to you, Roger, now.
Let me just unmute myself. Yes, please. Thanks. Yes, Peter.
You should have it now.
Almost. Yeah, I'm seeing the transfer screen. I should have my screen up again in a moment. Lots of issues raised there. Lots of information, interesting information on the challenges. And I think that's the sort of thing that we want to try to include in our wrap-up session. I've also been fielding questions throughout the presentations and putting together some notes to present at the end. So we'll keep our panelists online for that as well. Jens, I still haven't seen the invitation for me to show my screen. I see your screen now. Click on Change Presenter and then my name again.
Oh.
Up at the top.
Yeah. No, it should be.
It. Yep, I've got myself now.
Okay.
I hope. I said yes. Oh, hang on. That's because I'm not showing this. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I've been taking notes and fielding questions and building those into my summary notes for the end of the presentations. Thank you very much for keeping the time. We are right on time according to our schedule. And I'd like to turn over now to Lieutenant Commander Pinheiro from the Brazilian Navy, who's working at the Navy Hydrographic Center and has actually created a geoportal using software by himself. So we hopefully will have some time at the end of his presentation to see some of the work that he's done. Let me hand over to you now, Pinheiro. You seem to still be muted. Is that me or is that you?
All right.
Okay, I've got you now. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Longhorn, for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here and having this chance to show a little bit of our project, of our spatial data infrastructure, marine spatial data infrastructure here at Directorate of Hydrography and Navigation. So I'm Lieutenant Pinheiro. I'm an assistant for the environmental data section at CAGM, this Navy Hydrographic Center, and right now I'm basically leading all the work related to marine spatial data infrastructures. So to show a little bit of what we have been doing here, I'm going to talk about the DAGN data policy and governance, the DAGN MSDI architecture, DAGN MSDI present state, and the future perspective. The national SDI started being built back in 2008, and when we first started working with SDI, we started providing data and metadata for the national SDI, which we called by INDE, Infraestrutura Nacional de Dados Espaciais in Portuguese. But then when we start doing that, we realized that was something difficult to keep up. I'm not going to talk specifically about the national SDI, and later if you want to get more information about the national SDI, how to have to access the data and how to access the metadata, you can write me and I can show you how to do that. But basically, we started providing data and metadata for the national SDI, and we realized that was something difficult to keep up. So and then we decided to build our own marine spatial data infrastructure. So when we start that, we took to consideration all the laws and the internal regulations to provide the data. We start gathering all our data and checking all the laws and all the regulations behind this data, just to provide the data, just to set up the rules that people may have or may not have access to the data. That's one way that we could be transparent. We have many users that many times they write us to make requests, to request data, but many times we cannot provide. So in order to be more transparent, what we did, we are working on this document which shows all the data and how this data can be accessed. And also here we established the access level for the user. We think about the users, who are the users, and we establish the access level and what data they can have and what data they cannot have. So that's something we are doing basically for our marine spatial data infrastructure at this moment. So we start from this very important component, which is the policies and the governance. So we have one working group working straight in this document in order to provide the data. So this is in development right now. So we are working on this and then we start going through the technologies. So right now here I'm showing the basic concept, the architecture concept of SDI, is more specifically marine spatial data infrastructure. So we have the standards, we have the data, we have the technology, we have the governance, which was shown before here through the other presentations, and I just show a little bit of some of our policies. And for the standards, we have to follow the OGC standards for spatial data and metadata, also IHO S57, S100 standards. Also, we have to have our data following our vector model, is for the national SDI vector model. So we have to take this to consideration that all the data is being published using the vector model for the national SDI. And right now we are also working with the Armed Force SDI, which has its own vector model, the Defense SDI vector model. So that's something we have to be very careful and to follow in order to publish data and metadata. So in order to use the OGC standards, we have the GeoServer. GeoServer we have been using for basically to build our web services from different database, Oracle database, for instance, GIS, and GeoServer is also being used behind GeoNetwork. So GeoNetwork is a free open source, metadata catalog. We have been using, it's been very helpful. It's our main metadata catalog, and it has GeoServer behind it. For the data, we have data in many different databases, so PostGIS and Oracle databases. And also we have the Caris products, Caris HPD and Caris BDB. And we basically use GeoServer in order to create web services from different specific databases, Oracle or PostGIS database, and to bring to the web the CARIS products, the data that we have through CARIS at HPD and CARIS BDB. We have a specific CARIS product, which is a Spatial Fusion server. So we use the server to build all, to create all our web services. And these web services is shown through our main GeoPortal right now, which is Spatial Fusion Viewer, right? As Spatial Fusion has these two main tools, which is the server and the viewer. And the viewer is our main portal for showing the data on the web. One thing that I would like to emphasize, that everything I'm telling here, everything I'm showing, it's being tested. So we have all in our intranet. We don't have all this. We don't have this architecture being available in the internet yet. But it's something that we should do soon. So here I'm showing just a nautical chart over the GeoServer, something working in our intranet. Here it's also web services that we created through GeoServer for nautical charts. And as I said, our main portal right now, GeoPortal, is being Spatial Fusion Enterprise. So it's one way that we have to connect to our CARIS database, which is BDB and HPD. And also through Spatial Fusion, we can also bring specific files, like a shapefile. If I have a shapefile, I can just bring it through the portal. And wherever we cannot get through these main portals, we are developing specific APIs for some purpose, as showing the nautical charts. So we have the nautical charts bounding box, and through them you can just click it and we can have access to different kind of charts, paper charts, BSB, and also a link so we can buy the charts. That's something new we are coming right now. It's also building one way we can share TIE data. It's a real-time sharing. We're trying to collect the data and through radio transmission show the data through the web. So here is just an image showing what the user is going to be able to do very soon. It's already being tested in our intranet. So we have the tide gauges, and for each tide gauge, the user will be able to choose the time period for checking the tide data, and also download the data through different formats like PDF format and Excel format. And that's a summary here of our project. So basically, as I said at the beginning, we had our national SDI, which started being built back in 2008, and we start providing data for the national SDI, and we realized that was something difficult to keep up. So what we decided, we are now building our marine spatial data infrastructure with something like, I could say that is local. Is the DAG and the Directorate of Hydrography Navigation project. We have this marine spatial data infrastructure, which is the main one that will be connected to our national SDI, and also is going to be connected to our defense SDI. So instead of publishing data and metadata straight to each of these SDIs, National SDI and Defense SDI, we're going to have this main one, the Marine Spatial Data Infrastructure, which will be connected to the National SDI and to the Defense SDI. So wherever we publish data and metadata in this main Marine Spatial Data Infrastructure will be shown through the National SDI and through the Defense SDI. All these SDIs, they will be connected, and they will have to be following standards, ISO standards, EDGV vector data model, which is the data model for the National SDI and for the Defense SDI. Also, they have to follow basically our marine SDI will have to follow S57, S100 standards. Also be compliant with OGC standards for showing, for visualizing, for searching and downloading data. And all this has to be attached to policy and governance. I'm not going to talk about the governance the governance for the national SDI, because it's like two different worlds. One is the military world, and the other the civil world. So I'm focusing in what we have been doing from the MSDI, from the military perspective. But if you need more information, if you want to get some more information about the national SDI, the governance, the policies, and how it's been built, the portal, and the metadata catalog, I will be glad to share with you later. So that's it. That's what I plan to show here. And as I talked to Mr. Longhorn, I have that's what I showed here. You could see that I showed a lot of private products. So some of them they are paid, but to whoever wants to build, I'm talking about now from a technology perspective, because MSDI is not only showing the data and building a portal, a geoportal. It's more than that, as we could see through the components. But from the technology perspective, I have built in my own a geoportal using a GeoNode. So here I'm showing, I don't know if you are seeing there, I'm showing a JEBCO layer, WMS layer through the map, and also have the Brazilian Airways, the tide gauges, and the GPS stations on top of this map, and also a nautical chart. So what I'm using here is GeoNode, which is open source, and it's a very easy. It's just with 5 command lines you can install GeoNode and start publishing data. So if you have a different kind of data set, if you want to just show it, if you want to just start it, and you could start from GeoNode, which is very easy. So if you have something, any information about pollution, any different kind of data that is related to SDI, if you want to show to something that is there is no cost, we could start from GeoNode, which has GeoServer as the engine to create the services. Also, I'm showing here is GeoNetwork, which is the metadata catalog we are using here for the marine spatial data infrastructure at CHM. So it's also open source. It's very easy to install. If you want to start publishing your metadata, you could start with GeoNetwork, and it has a very simple way to show maps. You can see your maps also through the catalog, the metadata catalog. So it's just a template of something that if whoever, if you don't have a lot of money, if you want to start something, you could start with GeoNetwork or with GeoNode. So that's something that I'm building in my own, and many times I use these technologies to make tests and also bring to the marine spatial data infrastructure here at the AGN. So if you wanna, I'm available at any time if you need any help and more information about this product, some help on installation and things like that, and some reference. I'll be glad to help anyone. So that's what I have to show. I want to thank you, Mr. Longhorn, for the opportunity, and I hope to see you next time.
Great, thanks very much. Excellent presentation, especially impressed by the fact that you're building your own web portal without strong technical support. Well done. if you can hand back to me, we'll move straight on. We've got a good 15, 20 minutes for some questions here and general discussion.
Yes. Did you get, sir?
I guess I am. Let me just check. Yeah. Except I'm not moving. Sorry, folks, we can't get to the bottom of this. Right. Okay, I want to thank all three of the panelists, the presenters so far. We do have some time now, thankfully, for questions, and I've been taking notes throughout the presentation, so I'm going to call up a quick notepad file that I've created here, which addresses some of the questions that were asked in the questions panel, and a few observations and comments of my own. I think we will have to, if anyone wants to post more questions now, the questions panel is open on my screen. Let me just call up this. Can I make that bigger? Whoops, too big. Sorry. Just so that everyone can hopefully see this. So, is that visible? For those who still have a microphone on?
Yes, sir. That's good.
Oops, there it is. Right, well, what I've taken from the presentation, and again, thanks to all the presenters for this, it's interesting that, first of all, Malaysia has set up a formal, official Marine Technical Committee within the National SDI infrastructure, on a par with the other committees, the Framework Committee, Standards Committee, Clearinghouse, etc. And this is something that I think, from my own experience in some of my SDI consulting work, and including both the national level and the Marine Coastal SDI, this really is necessary. As one way to overcome this problem we have where the topographic or land-based people, whether it's topographic or just land-based data in marine communities, have difficulty communicating with each other. This is something we faced in the development of national SDI starting almost 20 years ago now. I don't use the term pejoratively, but the land-based people, the marine people, and the weather people work with completely different types of data. And in the early days of developing standards with OGC, even things like KML, etc., everything was coming out as 2D, which was very nice for land-based information. It didn't do much for the 3D, 4D people in the marine and ocean world, the Met world. So I think that's being very well addressed now, much more than before. And just to say that the comments that have appeared in all three of the presentations on looking at key and core data sets for marine SDI, some of which are quite unfamiliar to people working with the land-based data, are things that we are addressing in both the IHO and the OGC working groups. I'm also trying to pull this conversation from the marine world back into the UN GGIM initiative, who published their own list of core data sets about 8 months ago, which is still in draft mode. But I think the marine community needs to have good input into the more global GGIM draft, because these are being addressed by different countries. Again, in Malaysia, the biggest challenge was people and organization culture. And we've got 11 agencies involved, so how do you get buy-in to the marine components of the NSDI? Is that the real challenge? So maybe if Commander Yusuf is still online, could you say a couple of words about that? Unless I've lost him. Well, in which case, I think I'll move on to the next question, because it's similar. In Denmark, the biggest challenges were the governance model and the business and finance models. And again, these are two areas that the IHO and OGC are looking into, but especially the IHO Marine SDI. And Jenspeter's slide showed lots of different aspects of the governance challenges. So I guess the question we have to put out to the wider community, are these the typical governance-related challenges that other people are finding in their countries? And are they ones that are stopping development long before you get on to technology and financing, etc.? Jens, would you say anything on that?
Yeah, I think that the challenge for us was when we started, we hadn't the marine spatial planning directive, so it was more like that. How could we help them dealing with their daily work? But now when we have the marine spatial planning, I think it will turn out to be a little bit easier, because now we have a positive business case. We have a lot of agencies that are going to use the data for planning. They can see the possibilities when they're going to do the plans. And yesterday we had a meeting in the Danish task force for marine spatial planning, and we saw some of the agencies that decided before not to be a part of the MSDI now consider to be a part of the MSDI, because getting access to the data enables them to be within the framework and do the planning. And I think what we have decided to do, or the agency responsible for marine spatial planning, is that if you don't have your data in the MSDI, it won't be considered for marine spatial plans.
Right. I think that's also what we're seeing, certainly in Europe, the big drivers being the maritime policy, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which requires people to use INSPIRE compliant data, the Marine Spatial Planning Directive that's come out. So I guess in one sense, we're either lucky or blighted that we have official directives coming out from Brussels trying to bring the coastal EU member states together. But again, it is an issue. I think when you move into areas, I think we have another question here a bit later on marine cadastre. This will come up again. So I just wanted to move on to the access issues. This is something we don't find just in the marine world. We obviously find this in SDI generally. Who has access to official data? In other words, data coming from government bodies or other data providers who are sanctioned by government bodies that has some sort of legal status. And is this made available for free or for a fee? In a lot of cases we see it is both. This is a debate that's been going on for more than 20 years as well, not just in SDI, but in government information generally. So it leads to lots of issues on licensing, access control, data sharing, etc. And that's going to be the focus of one of our normal SDI webinars that we're planning in May. So I'll make sure that the notification of that gets out to the registered attendees of this one. The point is, if we went back to my introduction slide where I said, what is an MSDI? A marine SDI is basically part of a national information infrastructure and part of a national spatial data infrastructure. So if the country is still struggling with some of the broader issues to deal with that, then it's not going to help in developing the marine SDI. We talked about different levels of service were presented to us, and to get to marine data to different communities. The drive behind IHO and the S100, the new S100 standard framework, is basically to pull marine data out of the field where it was only used or mainly used for charting purposes, for safety of life at sea, for navigation, and to make sure that it can be used much more widely by a lot of different groups who never had access or thought about this before because of harmonization issues. And then using software to create, provide that data in different services at different levels. We had a question came up on marine cadastre. Is there a provision in marine cadastre components within the marine SDI looking at recording rights? In other words, ownership to cadastral features, leases, concessions, etc. And this came to us from Rick Wouters, who's with ULIS. It was also the focus of a session we had at the Common Vision Conference some months ago in the Netherlands on marine cadastre. And I would say now, I'm not sure how much more you want to cover this at the moment, but we are having a special webinar in this series in early September focusing just on marine cadastre.
I have a comment to that.
Please.
Yeah, because for instance, in Denmark, the Danish Geodata Agency is also the agency responsible for the Danish cadastre, and in that sense also for the marine cadastre. And the introduction of marine spatial planning have started to the discussion in Denmark about, do we need a more active marine cadastre, and we start to have some discussion in our agency that if we should establish a more active marine cadastre in order to help the marine spatial planning. And as I see it, a marine cadastre will just be a layer in the MSDI.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's also going to be driven partly, certainly again within the European context, because of the different directives that have come out. I just wanted to step back 1 minute for this free or for a fee discussion on a question that Andy Hogarth has sent in. Yes, of course, there is a lot of information in the marine world that is collected only by private industry. The oil and gas industry, even some of the fisheries operations. The point is, I don't think we're ever going to see a time when all of this data is free, and I think to keep harping on this when we're trying to build spatial data infrastructures is not doing anyone a service. We have the technology and the tools already to combine both free and non-free data, especially using metadata, a thing called the geographic REL, the rights expression language, which has never really been taken up, although it is an international standard. So there are always going to be times when government data itself may not be free for various reasons, such as the trading funds situation we have in the United Kingdom, and we have to come up with structures that work taking both of these into mind. Otherwise, we are not going to end up with the sort of overall access to data of all sorts that we need.
Roger,
yep.
I have a comment to that, because we have had a lot of discussion about making the Danish MSDI free, making the data in the Danish MSDI free. I think we have to have a more discussion about what does it mean to have data for free or accessible, because, for instance, in the Marine Spatial Planning Directive, it states that it's the best available data. But we had a discussion about, but what are we going to do if we don't have the data available? For instance, do we need to produce some new data so we can provide them for marine spatial planning through the MSDI? And if we make everything free, we don't have initiative for instance, agencies or private companies to produce these data sets. So I think we have to approach this as in a forward-looking perspective, that we need to have some providers that could enable us to provide better quality of data, more data that is at the moment not digital available, and if everything has to be free, there isn't an initiative for agencies or private companies to provide these data.
Well, it's also an issue not just with the marine world. When we were doing SDI development strategies and action plans going back as far as 2005, either at national or regional, i.e. subnational level, but very large regions that had 10 million people in them, it often turned out that even though the main body responsible for the data, typically a cartographic agency or similar, had virtually all of their data openly available or available for very, very low cost, and the same cost to everyone, the cadastral data was often not available, certainly for free, and usually at a higher cost. Quite often because the agency responsible for sort of maintaining and providing that data were not the data collectors. A lot of this came out of other organizations, including local government, local communities, who were not required to make the data available for free. The situation in the U.S., although I don't live there, is very much like that, with 3,000 counties across the 50 states, all basically having their own data policies, including on things like cadastral information, real estate information. I know because I've tried to get access to it. A quick question, because again for you, Jens Peter, on once we move out of the national level, so we've got the challenges that already exist at national level that all three of you had presented, and you had some successes there, and there's still work going on. But the minute you move into a transnational area, for example, you work in the Baltic Sea, or work we know it's in the North Sea, do you in order to get the level of cooperation you need, do you need to have that regulated some way? Does there need to be either legislation or some signed official agreements on data sharing between countries, etc.?
Yeah, but I think what we have today in Europe, for instance, we have the Inspire Directive, we have the Marine Spatial Planning Directive, and other directives that give us the framework to exchange data. But I also think that we have to realize that different countries approach marine spatial planning and MSDI in different ways, and it's not the same agency in every country that have the responsibility for the different tasks, and thus they have different approaches to how they deal with data. But I think that, for instance, the Marine Spatial Planning Directives clearly specify that we have to exchange data, and in that way we have an obligation to establish a framework for exchanging of data. So I don't think we need more regulation. I think what we have today is enable us to exchange data.
Right. Because that again leads on to the next question that we had concerning Brazil and the system in Brazil, or the situation in Brazil, where the SDI work started, what, 9 years ago, 2008. And I assume from the slide that there were federal laws and regulations in place for that. I guess my question is, does it seem to be a real necessary precursor to working on marine SDI in most countries that we need legislation first in order to get action going or not? I don't know if we have, are the 2%ers online at the moment? I haven't muted you. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's more related to SDI communication and dissemination. For instance, I just show here one template of an SDI, and why I did that, because since I started participating through the Marine Spatial Data Infrastructure Working Group, I started having the concept of MSDI. So the reason I didn't do this before, I didn't know what was and how to do it, and now I know how to do it. So I think federal law is important. As Brazil started because we had a federal decree that was the start. Now, we needed this federal decree, so the institutions and the entities started building their participating through the national SDI. So it's important just to start, I think, just to show to show the entities that the project of an SDI it's important and how it can contribute. But I think the most important thing before the law is to understand. Once someone understands the concept of the SDI and how they understand this through communication, through training, through dissemination. So I think that was, in my experience, and I'm talking about my experience, I think that was something very important, was getting the knowledge of SDI. And then we came with federal laws and internal regulation, because we have to follow them in order to have data quality and make data interoperable, and also to show the entities that they have to embrace the project. That's the only reason. Well, the only reason that's why I see that federal law is important, just to show the entities that they have to embrace the project. But once we have communication and dissemination, I think we could start with a marine SDI instead of just starting with a national SDI, something so on.
Yeah, I think from my own experience, there has been in the past marine work taking place either before or in parallel with the national SDI. Canada was a good example with their marine SDI publications back in 1999 in great detail. I guess it leads a bit onto the question about, what is an SDI, where so many people think that, well, I've done a geoportal, I've got some data, I've got a geoportal, I now have an SDI. And that actually can lead to real delays later on because people think, well, I've got my SDI. In one sense, that was an issue in the United States, where in 1994, the presidential executive order to create an NSDI resulted in thousands of geoportals all over the country, making data available using the FGDC metadata standard. But at the same time, about 20 years later, they went back to the drawing board in 2014 to try to define an NSDI. Because just having lots of portals and different regulations at different levels of government wasn't working. So I think it really is important to get these governance and policy issues out of the way first, and also because the technology changes so often, you've got to keep that in mind when you're working on this. Okay, again, Brazil, you've actually demonstrated how you've been using both the proprietary software for a lot of the underpinning data work, and then the open source software for making access and creating the services. I think this is also something that we're going to see, because certainly in the marine world, the collection of this data, the collection of the information at sea and even in the coastal areas for fisheries, etc., is typically being handled using commercially available software of a very specialized nature. But once that data has been collected, then it really is a possibility to use the open source information, open source software to make it available to other people. I also noted your issue on the governance issues, where you've got two worlds sort of colliding in a sense, the military and call it the non-military cultures on data, access to data, collection and use. It wasn't that long ago that certain member states, even in the European Union, would not make their coastal information available except under very restricted conditions because it was considered part of Homeland Security, long before we had a thing called Homeland Security. The same issue arose and may still exist, I'm not sure, in India, where you can only get coastal data at fairly low resolution, 1 to 250K, not at 1 to 50K or 1 to 10K, because they see this as a defense issue. So we have these things that we're still addressing, and I'm not sure, we have to try to find, again, our project is looking at best practice. So we're trying to collect as much information as we can from all the different countries on how these issues are being tackled. We're 2 minutes over time, so I'm just going to mention very quickly the standard side. And the marine world, we've had the IHO S57 standard for many years, which had to do with charting and creating the electronic navigational chart industry. They saw the sense or the use of coming up with a broader standard, S100, which is now being developed and will be rolled out over the coming years. And it has adopted the ISO 1900 series framework. So it falls in step with the ISO standards that the I call the land-based community is working. We still have this issue, though, of combining quite disparate data sets between the land side and the ocean side, which is why the next webinar in the series in June is going to look specifically at those issues where the land and sea data meet at the coastline and what is actions that are taking place to overcome some of the disparities there. So I need to wrap up now. I'm sorry, we are at the end of the allotted time. I've taken away lots of lessons from this. I will be doing a report following the webinar, not just the recording. All of the information that we had here, plus a lot more, is on or will be on the GSDI Association website in the Marine SDI project section. I'll send all of the registered participants the URL where they can get access to the full recording of the session. And I think other than that, again, because we are out of time, I'd just like to thank our 3 panelists again and thank everyone else who showed up for the webinar, and we hope to see you on the next one. I will now stop the recording.